We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's edition, we look at what's happening with DOGE, the debate over tariffs, and what Vladimir Putin thinks of Joe Biden's decisions in Ukraine. It's going to be quite the show. What's the latest with the Department of Government Efficiency headed by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy? And more importantly, what have they got their eyes set on? And is their goal even achievable? Well, we're going to find out that and more by speaking to Liberty Nation's economics guru, Andrew Moran. Thanks for being here, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the first question. We have DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, headed by two very bright men, very motivated men. Is their game plan even practical? Because it's not a government department, and it likely won't be.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it operates more as a think tank that's going to advise the administration and present ideas of what the government could cut. But I'm just skeptical. Maybe it's just my nature. I'm skeptical. But the fact that, everyone always talks about the deep state, but you have a bureaucratic state and you have politicians who love spending money, and the government has shown very little restraint on either Republican or Democratic led to, cut the budget, rein in spending, any of this stuff. So I'm just skeptical. I mean, it's great. It's a great idea in theory, but whether or not in practice we realize remains to be seen.
Well, let's talk about the practical aspects of this. 2/3 of government spending is essentially inviolate, and the other third is called discretionary spending, and that's where I believe the potential cuts could be made. So what is that annually? What is that discretionary budget total?
It's about $3 trillion around there. Yeah. So you brought up an excellent point. This has been a discussion I've seen among economists and on the X-verse. Is that okay? Well, you slash $2 trillion from the budget, but then you still have about $4.5 trillion of all the mandatory spending of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And there was this great thread last night I saw. There was an X account called Wall Street Silver. And he brought up the exact same point you did. And of course, some articles have also pointed to the same thing. Okay, so but are you willing to reform Social Security or Medicaid? And the response was just astonishing. Nearly everyone said, no, I paid into the system all my life. I want to get the benefit out of it finally. So there's going to be such hesitation, and you already see this from the incoming administration, to make any sort of cuts or reforms to these massive programs that are only becoming more expensive time goes on. I mentioned this on your show previously. If you look at the Congressional Budget Office numbers, you're seeing that Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all the mandatory spending is just going up and up and up. And it's going to come about $7 trillion out of the $10 trillion budget by 2034.
Okay, so these things, it seems unpopular, obviously, to do anything with Medicare, Medicaid. And I think Donald Trump has said that he wasn't going to touch that kind of area anyway, including Social Security, while he's on the campaign trail. So that leaves the roughly $3 trillion. But there's also the interest payments on the debt. Now, if you were head of DOGE, and I am putting your name forward for that as a replacement, Andrew Moran, get your name out there. Is there any way that the United States could, and because you see this on adverts all the time, restructure your debts to pay less in interest? Is there any motivation or feasibility in doing debt restructuring to limit this huge chunk of cash that essentially just goes to pay off the debt?
Well, no, because the only thing that you could do is have the Federal Reserve slash interest rates to 0% as it did during the pandemic. That's the only way that you could lower your annual interest costs in the annual budget. So you have the mandatory spending and then the interest charges, and that's not going to change. What you could do is you could do what Janet Yellen has been doing for the last couple of years and try to time the market, whereby you're only issuing short-term debt securities in the hope that eventually interest rates will come down, and you can then return to issuing medium and long-term treasury securities. But that's just that's stealth quantitative easing. So that's a terrible public relations stunt. But everyone loves to cut the $20,000 for drag queen shows to Ecuador or the $500,000 for transgender monkey research. That's popular. What's not popular is going to have to somehow take a scalpel, an axe, a chainsaw, whatever the case, to these retirement schemes that are just is swallowing the budget. And the interest payments are only increasing as the national debt rises. Because one more thing, if you look at the Treasury market, one of the primary reasons of why it has been increasing the way it has is fear that the incoming administration is going to exacerbate the country's fiscal deterioration because of all the across-the-board tax cuts and reliance on tariffs as a form of revenue generation. That's the fear that investors have. And when you only have foreign investor demand, if you want to talk about that, when you have foreign investment demand trouncing domestic demand for these treasury bonds, these yields are only going to increase, and it's only going to add to the annual interest payments in Washington.
Okay, so let's focus in on what DOGE might actually do. So there are the various, let's call them what they are, the weird projects that are research on mice given vodka to see how aggressive they are in fights, drag shows in Venezuela,
Russian cats walking on treadmills. I'm not entirely sure why those cats had to be Russian. I don't know. I'm sure there's a very good scientific reason for it, perhaps. But let's say Mr. Musk and Mr. Ramaswamy, they highlight, I don't know, 10 billion in the first 6 months. How does that go from, here's Elon Musk with a list, you probably posted on X, on his X account, of things that can be cut. How does that go from his suggestion, which as I think you're right, it's mostly going to be operating as a think tank, to getting cut? Yeah, well, you can pose that exact same question about, let's say, Rand Paul's Festivus report. Has that led to any results in any of the upper or lower chambers?
I'm a big fan of the Rand Paul Festivus report, by the way. I should.
Yes. And that is entertaining reading. There's actually a lot of people know this, but that's actually a successor to James Inhofe's annual report too on wasteful spending. But back to your question, yeah, I mean, when the president proposes his budget, these things get revised anyway, and you're going to have to wrestle off the cascade of bureaucrats and politicians and aides and legislative aides and all these people. Whether it comes to reality or not, you can only hope that common sense returns to Washington and people say, you know what, do I have to spend, the finite tax dollars on hamsters drinking alcohol and engaging in combat? Is that really a wise decision for taxpayer money?
Or at the very least, put it on pay-per-view, monetize it.
I'm sorry?
Monetize it, put it on pay-per-view for those hamsters. People would watch that, I guarantee it.
Tyson and Jake Paul on Netflix.
Yeah. But that could be the names of the first hamsters in the octagon. So I think what the advantage is here, because I do see DOGE as being a force for good, is that rather than printing what has happened, as in the Festivus report, when it's too late, the money's already gone, it would be pointing out, here are the things that money will be spent on, here it's in the process, and thereby there'll actually be some public demand. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? It's really widening the arena of people who are actually going to see this is what they're spending, this is what Congress is spending your money on.
Yeah.
And so, you've got to make your voice heard to bring this down. Essentially, DOGE is an all-of-nation effort rather than all of the X sphere.
Well, that's an interesting point you brought up, because the Cato Institute, it actually maintains a comprehensive list of what all these agencies spend their money on and what will be spent on in the coming fiscal years. That's another thing that DOGE could be influenced by, is what that libertarian think tank monitors every year.
We'll be back after this short break talking tariffs. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.